everybody. We are live. It's 6 o'clock and it is the second Tuesday. It's the first Tuesday of the month, or sorry, the second Tuesday of the month, but the first curated cinema of the month. I'm Rebecca Fons. I'm Gorton's director of film, and I'm super excited to be sharing with you some of my top docs today. So I'm going to present this guy, and we're going to go through some of these, and I'm going to make sure that I'm all set. I'm going to be putting some questions and links and stuff in the comments below. So please feel free to chime in. Let us know, what are you doing? Are you making dinner or thinking about making dinner? Are you thinking about ordering dinner? There's no shame there either. So let us know what you're doing in the comments below. If this is your first curated cinema, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. So basically how this goes is twice a month I present short lists, usually 5 films, but I'm a big cheater, so I usually sneak a few extras at the end of some of my favorite or highly recommended films based on a theme. So we've already looked at the films of Alfred Hitchcock, and last time we talked about some thrills and chills for Halloween. So now we are talking about top docs. So 5 documentaries that I think are really special and that I really love and recommend for you to check out. So we're going to get started, and every single time it's like a rocket launch here, and I think this is going to work. Yes, it worked. Okay, I got to go back. I'm so excited that the screen worked. And I'm here in the corner to chat with you, and so you can see my face, but as I always say, film is a very visual medium, and so I like to present some photos from the films that we are talking about. So I'll first say just about documentaries is that I'm a huge documentary fan. It might be a genre that's my favorite genre. I love a rom-com just as much as everybody, but documentary provides a sense of authenticity and humanity that I think is really special. I think sometimes a film that's a narrative film or a fiction film, maybe an actor you don't like, or you never forget that it's Tom Hanks or Tom Cruise, and you kind of sometimes can't lose yourself in those films, or maybe there's a costume that just doesn't really work for the time period or whatever the case may be. But documentaries, there's no one performing. There's an authenticity and a humanity that is presented through the camera. Obviously, documentary filmmakers and documentary editors are creating a world through the way they edit the film. So, they may follow someone for 5 years, but the way they edit the film may be a representation of that person that isn't a true representation of that person, because there's music cues and there's dramatic moments and things are cut up so that the film is exciting. But I still think, even with all of that, knowing that there's that recreation of reality, documentaries are far more real than maybe reality TV. So anyways, I'm a huge doc fan, and I think documentaries are interesting right now because 2018, there was it was like the year of the documentary. So you may remember the Won't You Be My Neighbor documentary came out about Mr. Rogers, the Three Identical Strangers film about the triplets separated at birth, and Free Solo about the free climbing guy, which I had to watch like this because I'm terrified of heights, and death-defying acts of physical strength. But those films all kind of made it to the mainstream. So a lot of times docs live in a world that you don't see them at your multiplex, you don't see them at your local community cinema, although we show a lot of docs at Gorton. And so you maybe are not aware of them as much. But all 3 of those films, as well as a few other documentaries, really kind of made it into the zeitgeist and into the kind of national film conversation. So documentaries became really popular. They were popular at the box office, and critically acclaimed. And from there, it just felt like we've been seeing a lot more documentaries. Netflix has really embraced the documentary in terms of films that they're producing or that they've purchased and put on Netflix. Hulu is the same way, Amazon Prime the same way. So, and I also find that may be a byproduct of that 2018, there was just a lot of energy around documentary films. And then also, I feel like when we're going through a time that is maybe volatile politically or socioeconomically, or there's just a big conversation, docs are born out of that. So climate change, politics, things like that, you see, people want to tell those stories. People want to shine a light on those stories and direct a camera toward those stories. So we see a lot of films come out of those sort of maybe tumultuous times or very kind of changing times. So it gives us an opportunity to explore our world through film in a way that I think is really unique. It helps us connect ourselves to one another and to our fellow human. And so I just really love getting lost in a documentary, even though the people aren't performing and there's no special effects. I find myself really getting engaged and lost in those films. So, and my last caveat before I start is there are so many films here that I did not include. I mean, I really had to kill my darlings here. So for every film that I'm sharing, there are like 5 per film that I didn't share because it was painful. It was a painful curation for me, but I did it because I was excited to share these films. So, a film like Hoop Dreams or The Act of Killing, War Room, which is a wonderful political documentary and feels like you should watch it because of the last month that we've had. It's about basically a campaign, a political campaign for president. Harlan County, USA, which is a super Americana film. These are all really, really terrific films that I didn't include here, but I wanted to give you 5 films that had some upbeat stuff and some inspirational stuff and also some more critical viewing and some classics. So that all being said, and I'm going to try to drop the trailers for each of these films as I talk about them. So here comes the first trailer into the chat, I think. Yes. So our first film is Errol Morris's The Thin Blue Line. So this is from 1988. And this is one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. This is not just a top doc, this is a top film of all time. So The Thin Blue Line is about a crime. It's a crime documentary. It's sort of like the prototype for crime documentaries. So it's 1976, it's outside Dallas, Texas, and a guy named Randall Dell Adams is hitchhiking and he accepts a ride from a teenager named David Harris. As we come to find out, the car that Harris is driving is a stolen car. And later that night, someone in that car, when it gets pulled over, someone in that car shoots and kills the police officer who pulled over the car because the headlight was out. And from there's a manhunt and a court case, and a jury believes that Randall Dale Adams, the hitchhiker, is the one who shot and killed the police officer, and that is based on testimony that the teenager David Harris, who was driving the car, gave. And so the film explores the testimony of that teenager, of David Harris. It explores the story of Randall Dale Adams. It explores the witnesses or the supposed witnesses of the crime. And it's just truly gripping. And I mean, in terms of, if you like true crime, and I'm a big true crime fan, it's just an absolute amazing sort of unraveling puzzle of this moment of tragedy and moment of crime. And there's something that Errol Morris does in this film that's really special. And and it's reenactments. So reenactments, I mean, like we all know Unsolved Mysteries, and that show, which was post Thin Blue Line, really used reenactments, right? So I remember, like, as a kid, there'd be those kind of shaky cam moments where you like see the crime happening, and then it cuts to the host, and he talks about Unsolved Mysteries. So Errol Morris kind of like introduce that into the world of documentaries, and I wanted to do a really quick like vocab in terms of like how the different ways documentaries are presented, because as we talk about these films, there's going to be different ones that different kind of themes and styles. So reenactments obviously are when actors or performers are reenacting something that's being retold, right? And then we have talking heads, which means it's just a sit-down interview where the subject is talking to the camera. Sometimes you hear the interviewee off camera asking questions. Sometimes you don't. B-roll is if I was talking about, how my childhood and my elementary school days. You would maybe see me saying that, but you'd cut to a shot of my elementary school or like the playground or something. The B-roll just kind of is supplementary footage that complements what's being said or contextualizes what's being said. And then you have archive footage. So obviously this would be, cut to an old news report or cut to an old newsreel or family footage or a newspaper article, a photo of a newspaper article. You have verite style, which is meets truth, and it's observational. So rather than me sitting down and talking to the camera would just follow me around in my regular life. So those are kind of the different ways that documentary films are crafted: talking heads, verite, B-roll, things like that. So Errol Morris uses talking heads quite a lot. He's famous for that. And he uses B-roll, and he uses a lot of different techniques. And in The Thin Blue Line, he uses reenactments. And it's incredibly effective because the reenactments are really restrained. So it's not like Unsolved Mysteries, where it was always like super dramatic and sort of poorly acted. This is very much restrained and kind of at a distance. And I think he does that because he's a great filmmaker, but also because, the film is all about people's memories. They're all recounting this crime. So David Harris and Randall Dale Adams are both in jail recounting the crime. The witnesses are recounting the crime. The police officers are recounting the crime. And that's not altogether interesting, just someone remembering and telling you. So Errol Morris recognized that to make it more cinematic and to provide a more storytelling quality, he used reenactments so that we could really feel these moments. And also we get different sort of tellings of what happened. So he gives us an opportunity to really see how truly tricky the memory is, and how what I remember may be very different from what you remember, especially during something dramatic. So something interesting about that is that the Oscars, the film was not nominated for a Best Academy Award Oscar because of the reenactments. The Academy deemed it that it broke the rules, so they didn't give it a nomination, which is sort of hilarious. He has gone on to win Academy Awards, so don't worry about that. Errol Morris is doing okay. And the thing that I love about this film so much, and I'll show you another some images from it. The thing I love about this film so much is that film, often film gets made and like it, is seen in theaters and that's sort of that. But every so often a documentary or a narrative film impacts the world outside of the movie theater, right? Or outside of the four corners of your movie screen. And in this film, there's sort of a shocking moment towards the end of the film where there's a bit of a confession. I'll say no more because it is really, truly wonderful and fantastic in the moment. And because of that moment, because of that revelation, it changed the course of the lives of these two men, especially Randall Dale Adams. So, every once in a while, film can become a political act or a political tool, or it can become an active of change, or an action of change, or a catalyst for change. And it's just really, really incredible to me how much this film had so much of an impact on these two people and on the filmmaker and just on the lives of the subjects. That doesn't always happen, but it's really incredible when it does. So it's a monumental film for that. And Variety even called it in 2008 the most political work of cinema in the last 20 years. So that's saying something. Some documentaries that also have made change, would be An Inconvenient Truth, which is the Al Gore documentary about climate change. Super Size Me, the Morgan Spurlock film about, he does like the McDonald's binge, and that kind of changed the way calories are shown on fast food menus. And then Paradise Lost is a multi-part film that also was about a crime and that changed the outcome of the case for the people that were accused of the crime. And another thing I love about The Thin Blue Line is the music. So Philip Glass does the soundtrack. I actually own this soundtrack, which is like the nerdiest thing I've ever admitted on Facebook Live. But it's incredible, and it adds to that sort of unfolding, unraveling puzzle. And Philip Glass. I mean, if you can get Philip Glass to score your film, you should do it always. And some complimentary viewing to Thin Blue Line would be The Fog of War, which is another Errol Morris film. So this is an interview with Robert McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense for Kennedy and Johnson, and he sort of recounts his work with both of those presidents and the various wars that they were involved in. And it's really gripping. And it won the Best Academy Award, the documentary for Best the Academy Award for Best Documentary the year it came out. So that's a really fantastic one. Any Errol Morris film is really fantastic, but Thin Blue Line is a really great first starter. And Sue asked how law enforcement weighed in on Thin Blue Line. That's a really good question. There were some controversies around this film, including with Randall Dale Adams, who's the gentleman you see on your top right, who had real issues with what happened to his life after this film. I would have to do a deeper dive, but I believe there are some members of law enforcement who really think this film was great, and it exemplifies how memory and witnesses and the penal system is really complicated and flawed. And then there are some that feel like it paints the police in a not flattering light. And so it's really mixed. It would be interesting to watch the film in 2020, or to hear what law enforcement thinks of the film in 2020, just as we're talking about police and law enforcement in such an intense way. So The Thin Blue Line 1988 is available to stream on the Criterion Collection. It's also available to rent on Amazon Prime, iTunes, and Google Play. So that is our first one. And our second film is Spellbound. So this one is, I'll put the trailer in the Facebook chat here. And let me know if you've seen any of these films in the chat, or if you're going to watch them tonight. Do a five-part documentary binge. So Spellbound is from 2002. It's directed by Jeffrey Blitz, and it is about 8 kids who are competing in the Scripps National Spelling Bee. And it is an absolutely charming film that is rated G. It's appropriate for kids. It's appropriate for parents. I've seen it numerous times, and it's just a really, really wonderful competition film. There's so many competition films, but this one is really a terrific one in terms of like kids competitions. So it's like I said, 8 different kids are competing, practicing and competing in the 1999 Scripps National Spelling Bee. And so you get to see them, training with their parents, traveling to DC, and then actually doing the competition itself. It was nominated for Best Documentary Feature Academy Award. It lost to Bowling for Columbine, which is another film that certainly had some impact in the world around us. That's directed by Michael Moore, and certainly impacted some gun legislation and gun rights activism. And the film, and here certainly is a great example. There's some really quirky kids and really like nerdy kids in a very charming way. This particular kid on screen is a really great character. And that's, well and good, and it's kind of fun to follow along and see if you can spell the words that they're getting. I can't spell many of them. I'm a terrible speller, but really at its core, the film is about, I think, the American dream and the complexities of the American dream. So the film, really puts into stark relief the differences between class, race, socioeconomic status, privilege, because the 8 kids, in that group of 8 kids, you get to see, a kid who has tutors, every day, a kid who practices with their parents for 5 hours a night, a kid who has a single mom and who doesn't have the money to have, fancy flashcards. And you get to see how that translates to this national competition, and how, even if you have, you work hard and you want it, you may not achieve the success that you want based on, the lot of life that you have. So I think, and it's not a cynical look at that, I don't think. I think it's a really endearing and complex look at the American dream, and sort of the very nuanced ways our lives are what we want in success is impacted by who we are and what we have, and the access we have to it. With the kids, they're just so charming. I think you see yourself in different kids. The girl in the bottom right is certainly a kid that I identify with. And you may see yourself as a child, like I said, or a kid in your life. They all have really distinct personalities. They're all, much older now. This was 18 years ago, so they're all adults. They barely have children of their own. And it's from 2002, which there's a different feeling in the film. It's a very formulaic doc. There's no reenactments. It's talking head, archive footage, talking head, B-roll, talking head, B-roll. It's not going to blow your socks off in terms of filmmaking style, but it's just and I actually like that. I feel like they don't make them like this anymore. 2002, this was a different time, completely in filmmaking, and I kind of like it. It's just like a sturdy doc. It gives it to you how you kind of want to see the story, and I really love that. And there's a lot of cringeworthy moments, these nerdy kids, but a lot of really charming moments too. And I taught this film when I worked at the Chicago International Film Festival. I taught this kid to Chicago public school students many times, and they really loved it. And we even had someone from Scripps Spelling Bee come out and do like a little mini pop-up bee, which was a lot of fun. So that's a great one, and it is available to stream on Peacock and the Criterion Collection, Criterion Channel, excuse me, and it's available to rent on iTunes and Google Play. And some complimentary viewing would be another really great kid competition documentary. It's called Brooklyn Castle, and it's about chess players. And then there's two really great competition docs with adults, Kings of Pastry and King of Kong. Kings of Pastry is about baking competitions, and King of Kong is about arcade competitions. And I have one other competition kid doc, but that's one of my bonus docs, so I won't tell you that yet. Okay, 3 of 5. Okay, Undefeated. So this is a film from 2011, and I'll put the trailer here really quickly. Also, it's pouring rain in Chicago, so you may hear some thunder in the background, which is sort of dramatic. Also feels like it's about 9 o'clock at night because it got dark at 4 o'clock. So, okay, so Undefeated is from 2011. It's directed by Daniel Lindsay and TJ Martin. This is a film about Manassas High School, which is in North Memphis. It is a down-on-its-luck high school that has never won a football team game ever. So they have a 110-year losing streak. And the team, there's no real path for success. And enter a former football coach named Bill Courtney, who comes on board to turn the team around. And that is exactly what he does. So you follow the various players on the team and Coach Courtney as they practice. Shows what a football person is. I am sports person. I almost said rehearse. Next time I'll call halftime the intermission, and I'll really give myself away. But you see them at practice, you see them at games, and without any spoilers, you see the ending of the film and if they are successful in all of their hard work. The film follows a few particular kids, and their stories are heartbreaking and also inspiring. And Coach Courtney is kind of there along the way, really tough love, like yelling at them, but also supporting them. And then as the film goes on, you sort of watch these young boys become men, and you even see Coach Courtney sort of have a coming of age a little bit too. And it's incredible. Everyone changes by the end of the film. And it won the Best Documentary Feature Academy Award. It's very well, it was sort of memorable at the moment. One of the directors swore when he took the stage, which I guess if you're winning an Academy Award on your first feature film, you would probably swear. But they swore on the stage, and they've talked about in their interviews, that they really just was totally entrenched themselves at Manassas High School, and the kids got really, really comfortable around them, and they followed many more members of the team, but really it boils down to about 4 kids, including my favorite, a kid whose nickname is Money, and whose story is just so heartbreaking and wonderful, heartbreaking and wonderful. And I would say this is a sports doc to rival all sports docs. Again, I'm not a football person, I'm not a sports person, but this is one of those films that's just like, it's not even really about the football, as the football is very critical, and there's some amazing football footage, but it's really about these kids' lives. And the film was shot with no booms, no microphones, just these 2 guys and their cameras, and the access that they have and the comfort and ease of the students with the cameras is remarkable, because you never see a kid kind of like look over at the camera and give it away. It's shot in a very verite style, so it's very observational, and you're right up in there. So you're in the football huddles, you're in the classrooms, you're in the doctor's office when a student's getting word that his knee is really messed up. I mean, it's just really in your face, and you really, really feel every moment of these kids' lives. And it's also basically over the course of one season. So there's a timeline and a map to it that make it really, really easy to watch. And I'll tell a story about this film. So again, when I was at Chicago International Film Festival, I used this film for high school screenings with students. And so I'd seen the film, beforehand. I made a study guide for it. I watched it again with a bunch of kids. I had seen the film maybe 4 times. And there was a screening of it, and I had, I didn't have anything going on. And so I was like, I'm going to sit down and watch the last like 45 minutes. And there was a seat right inside the theater, right at the front. And I sat down next to a woman, and I was watching the film for like the fourth time, legitimately the fourth time. And I just was crying so hard. And I looked over, it's going to make me emotional right now. And I looked over, and the woman next to me was also crying. And she looked at me, like we both looked at each other at the same time. And we hugged. I mean, we hugged the last 10 minutes of this movie. I mean, I'm getting emotional. It was just one of those moments where she didn't know, and she didn't know what was about to happen, and I did, but I just felt so engaged by the film, and so you're just rooting for these kids on such a major, major level, and it's really, really emotional, and it'll make you stand up and cheer, and if you like football, it's got that too. So it's available to stream on Netflix. It's also available to rent on Amazon Prime, iTunes, and Google Play. And some complimentary viewing to Undefeated would be Hoop Dreams, the Steve James film shot right here in Chicago. So, and Nat from Lake County Film Festival, I totally agree with you. Undefeated, I was like, oh, another sports competition film, but it's one that really, really stuck with me about 10 years ago. So really, really great one. Okay, our penultimate title is Raoul Peck's 2017 film, I Am Not Your Negro. So this film was nominated for Best Documentary Academy Award. It lost to O.J. Made in America, but is an incredible film, and I would argue is perhaps more seminal and more memorable and timeless than the O.J. doc. Maybe not, depending on your your love of O.J. or of literature. Who knows? I'm Not Your Negro is about James Baldwin, who we see here in the image. And in 1979, James Baldwin, who's a writer and an essayist and a public speaker, wrote a letter to his literary agent about a book that he was writing called Remember This House. And the book was to be about the lives and his relationship with the lives of three of his close friends, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, and Martin Luther King Jr., all who had been assassinated. And the book was not finished, the essay was not finished, and then Baldwin died in 1987, and he left 30 complete pages behind of the book. And so the filmmaker Raoul Peck sort of envisions what that book would have been and uses those 30 pages as an assemblage with images of Baldwin, footage of Baldwin on talk shows and speaking publicly, and interviews about Baldwin and archived footage to really complete the book, basically in a cinematic sense. It's gorgeous. It's a celebration of Baldwin's work. If you're not familiar with his work, it's an amazing sort of 90-minute crash course introduction. Also a quick lesson about race in America, about racial politics in America. It really gets a lot done in the 90 minutes that it has for running time. Oh, I missed a question. Sue, the filmmakers didn't know how the season story would go. With Undefeated, correct. They did not know how it would go. So they were just there and they stuck with it but I don't want to say anything. Maybe it paid off, maybe it didn't. But they did not know. They just saw that there was a story and they went for it, which so many documentaries do. It's like you just follow the story and you hope you get a successful ending, but success can be defined in a lot of different ways. Anyway, so, and I'm going to put while I'm looking at the chat, I'm going to put the link for I Am Not Your Negro trailer here. Oops. Bear with me as I do this. There we go. I think that'll work. So I Am Not Your Negro. So I would say that it feels like critical viewing if you want to get to know James Baldwin. But I also feel like in 2020, a film like I Am Not Your Negro is as relevant as it was when it came out. Baldwin's words are as relevant as they were when they were written, and feels like really critical viewing. I think in light of the Black Lives Matter movement that we saw earlier this year, Baldwin's work and I Am Not Your Negro further contextualizes the fight for Black Lives Matter and racial equity in our country, and it feels like something that you should kind of watch every year. I think, I watched it in 2017 when it came out and didn't know much about Baldwin's work, and then watched it again this summer and found there was more contextualization, more nuance. I discovered more things. I heard different things more than I did the first time I watched it. And it's really beautifully done. All the narration, which are Baldwin's words, is done by Samuel L. Jackson. There's amazing music. And it's really, really a celebration of James Baldwin's work, and feels, like I said, like his work is still really relevant and still really important. So I'm Not Your Negro is available to stream on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Hulu. It's also available to rent on iTunes and Google Play. And some complimentary viewing in terms of thinking about Black Lives Matter, and some films that you could watch alongside I'm Not Your Negro. Whose Streets is a great documentary about the relationship between police and citizens. And then Toni Morrison, The Pieces I Am, is an amazing documentary about the writer and playwright Toni Morrison. It was released before she passed away, and then she passed away when it was in its theatrical release. And I sat down and watched it again after she passed away. And again, that was one of those moments where when things changed, somewhat like the John Lewis documentary from earlier this year, I watched it when he was still with us, and then he passed away, and I watched it again, and suddenly the story has even more relevance and even more impact on the viewer because this person is no longer with us. So I'm Not Your Negro is great and is our penultimate film. And then our final film of this lineup of our top docs, it's gone so fast. Maybe it hasn't, I don't know. I always feel like this flies by, but who knows, is American Factory. So American Factory is a newer film just from 2019. It's directed by Julia Reichart and Steve Bognar. And it won the Best Documentary Feature for the Academy Award. And I'm going to drop the trailer into the chat. Hold on one second. And I don't know if I would think this one may be one that people have seen because it is available on Netflix. American Factory is about a GM plant that closes in Ohio, in rural Ohio. And a Chinese businessman, a billionaire, buys it, and then opens a new factory in the GM plant that closed. The film is sort of a study of the cultural and I guess operational clashes that take place between the very, very different workers, some of who are Chinese and some of who are American and Ohioans, coming together to create a new manufacturing plant. It won Best Documentary Feature for the Academy Award earlier this year. And I think, for me, when I start thinking about or having conversations about, like the global economy and America's economy and our relationship with China and international commerce, my head starts to spin. I did not do very well in economics in school. So that can be really hard for me to kind of like wrap my brain around. But American Factory does this amazing job of like distilling all of those huge themes into this specific story that has a lot of humor and a lot of relatability and a lot of commentary on all of those themes. And so it's sort of like, I feel like American Factory should be taught in, humanities, culture, international studies, economics. It's a study in economics and international trade and international studies. The film is based on a 2009 short by Reichart and Bognar called The Last Truck, Closing of a GM Plant. And you see some footage of that film in American Factory, and then they expanded it to the feature film. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2019, and then came out on Netflix later that year. And I would say that the film is not without judgment. It's not just sort of a view of this experience of this plant. There is some judgment, or maybe not judgment, but certainly commentary about all of those themes I was talking about. And, it doesn't villainize anyone. No one is villainized, certainly, but there is commentary on capitalism, on, conflicting values between the Chinese workers and the American workers. Labor rights certainly come into play. But what's lovely about it is ultimately everybody wants to find passion and respect, self-respect, and received respect by the work that they do. And there's this huge group of Chinese workers come over to Ohio, and they give up their lives and relocate and uproot their lives to come to Ohio. And similarly, these folks in Ohio, many of them who worked at the GM plant, who come back to work at this new factory, they are starting at zero. They're struggling. The recession is still very much felt. They've lost their jobs. Some of them have lost homes. Some of them have overcome addiction. And so everyone's kind of starting at zero because they're kind of learning new things. Either they're learning a new trade, or they're learning a new culture, or they're learning a new lifestyle. And it's a really, really charming look at how that can work and how it can be a place where you can find new friends and find new passions and find new skills and find respect. That being said, there's some really hilarious stuff when a group of the Americans goes over to China, when the Chinese first arrive in America, just as everyone sort of starts to get to know each other. There's some really, really funny moments, but also some really eloquent and sort of profound moments as they talk about global commerce and the relationship between China and America. So that's a fantastic film, and I don't even have any complimentary viewing with that one. I think you should just watch American Factory, and there's no reason not to. It's available to stream on Netflix. If you have a Netflix account, it's free for you to watch. So check that one out for sure, and it is very worthy of its Academy Award. Okay, so I said I had 5 films, but I'm a cheater, so I've got 3 extras, 3 bonus docs. And again, there's so many more. Man, it's so hard. I could have done The Nook of the North, but I didn't even do that one. So 3 complimentary films would be Grey Gardens, the Maisel brothers film. This is from 1976. It's available to stream on HBO Max and the Criterion Channel and to rent on Amazon and iTunes. You see there Big Edie and Little Edie, the Bouvier sisters who live in a decrepit house and lead very, very odd lives. It's a fantastic film, and the Maisels were really seminal filmmaking duo. And this is a very verite film, very observational film with some direct address to the camera because Little Edie's loves the spotlight. So, and then Mad Hot Ballroom. This was I said I was going to tell you about this one later. This is definitely a compliment to Spellbound. So it's from 2005. It's available to rent on Amazon and iTunes, and it is about a ballroom competition in New York City in 2005. A film that feels like a celebration of New York as much of a celebration as these young kids who are practicing and preparing for this ballroom competition. Really, really lovely film, and that's directed by Marilyn Agreld. Marilyn Agreld. And then finally, 2012, Stories We Tell. This is directed by Sarah Polley, who you see here in the image. It's available to stream on Amazon Prime and to rent on iTunes. In this film, Sarah Polley searches through her family's history to find out kind of what's real and what's not. It's really, really unique film that gets taught a lot in like documentary classes because it's about sort of memory and the problems of memory, both in how we retell things and also how we remember them and how we use those memories to craft our present day lives and our relationships with the people around us. So really 3 fantastic films. And I would say if you are liking any of these docs, if you go check them out, there's a really great show on IFC called Documentary Now. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's Fred Armisen and Bill Hader, who are both SNL alums, and they kind of do spins of a lot of these films. So they do kind of a spoof. A spoof is better than a spin to describe it. They do a spoof of Grey Gardens. I believe they do a spoof of The Thin Blue Line. They do a spoof of The Thin Blue Line. There's definitely some competition docs in there. And A Nook of the North they do. So they just have a lot of fun with kind of poking fun at documentaries. And if you're a doc fan, it's a total gas. It's really great, and they've been doing that for many, many seasons. And that might also be on Netflix as well, but it's called Documentary Now. So that's our top docs. This has been so fun. I like I said at the beginning, documentary is really a favorite genre of mine, and I'm so excited that documentaries seem sort of popular these days, and they're sort of the hot thing. Because they are so special, and I'm so excited to see what documentaries will come out of 2019 and 2020, and that we may see on the big screen at Gorton and elsewhere in 2021. So thanks for tuning in. This will be posted on our YouTube channel as well, so if you want to catch some of these films or find out where they are, and this will also live on our Facebook page, of course. And our next Curated Cinema is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and it is called Filmsgiving. And that is going to be films about families. Not necessarily films about Thanksgiving, although there certainly will be 1 or 2 Thanksgiving-themed films, but this will be films about families. The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, the comedic, the tragic, films about people coming together as families. I know a lot of our Thanksgivings are going to look a lot different this year, so if you can't connect with your family in person, maybe you can connect with some functional or dysfunctional families through cinema. So thanks so much for tuning in. Sue and Nat, thank you so much for your questions and your comments. Anybody else who was watching and enjoyed this. And thanks also to Vicky. Thanks everybody. I hope you have a great dinner and I hope you have great watching. And we will see you on November 24th for Filmsgiving. Thanks everybody.